All right, good afternoon. Welcome to our fourth Criminal Justice Connect. This series is presented to the community on behalf of our Dauphin County Criminal Justice Advisory Board. And today's topic is on risk needs responsivity. The topics were selected from a survey that was sent out to the community on things they wanted to learn more about what we're doing locally in the criminal justice system to address needs out there. And our presenters today are very knowledgeable on this subject. We're very glad to have them both. Chad Libby, our Director of Probation Services in Dauphin County, and Shannon Danley, our Director of Pretrial Services in Dauphin County. Both of them have been instrumental, okay, no pun intended, since we're going to talk about instruments, instrumental in helping to carry out evidence-based practices in our county and working to have folks understand more about what risk is, what it isn't, how to case plan, all of these things. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to, I think, Chad first, and we'll go from there. Again, just keep yourself muted throughout. If you have questions, put them in the chat. At the end, we will have time for Q&A, and if we don't get to your question, I'll make sure to email out to the group anything. Just give me your email, we can correspond, and we'll get those things answered. So without further ado, Chad.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending this webinar. I know I want to thank Catherine for her leadership in putting these together, as well as the other facilitators of the webinars, as well as the participants. So, risk needs responsivity model. I will be, candid. This is typically a 4 to 6 hour training minimum. So I'm really going to do my best to make it succinct in a 90-minute window. And I know Sharon's going to talk a little bit about the pretrial risk screening tool that we're using also in Dauphin County. So, technically, really, risk needs responsivity is definitely the pathway to risk reduction. Without it, we're not able to achieve the ultimate goal of reducing risk. So our learning objectives today are to demonstrate how existing systems are now changing to appropriately support new innovations through a lens, implementing a risk needs assessment in a probation and parole department, the 4 core correctional competencies required for risk reduction in the daily work of staff, how will supervision practices change? I think you'll find this interesting. Is your organization ready? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And unfortunately, there is the bad and the ugly that you have to be willing to accept and you have to work through. But if you're able to get through the weeds with all that, you'll really lay a good, successful foundation of evidence-based practices. And what are the best practices, policies, procedures, and processes? And what are the implementation challenges? And how EVP has been an early success for one PA department. And that would be Dauphin County. We'll be glad, and we're going to share some statistics with you on some of the successes we've had. So, how it works. So let's first talk about generation of assessments. Really the first generation of assessments really date back to, oh gosh, I mean, you're really talking assessments period over a century ago. But really, when you look prior to 1974. Most assessments were just your generic professional judgment, clinical type assessments. And when you look at that, you're really looking at an unstructured investigation, an interview of what you want to call it, an evaluation of risk, which is based on your experience as a professional in that line of work, able to make an assessment, in terms of what risk level that individual fell under. Then, you talk about then you move into after 1974, you start seeing second generation tools looking at risk. They looked at static factors, as you know, static factors that do not change, looking at the age, history, the arrest, those type of things. They were looking at second generation. And what's interesting about second generation, they've been around for a very, very long time, but they help build a support and foundation through research, the creation of a third generation tool, which we started seeing really in the late 1990s, early 2000s, all the way up to about, I would say about 2010 to about 11, where you finally moved into a fourth generation. But a third generation was a much better assessment instrument because it looked at static and dynamic factors. Those risk factors that are correlated with a rearrest where you looked at dynamic factors that you could absolutely change, such as, if you're in a domestic relationship, influenced by drugs, abuse, those types, you can change. It's not always easy, but you can change that situation you're in. So we're looking at dynamic risk factors that are criminogenic factors that are known to be correlated with risk to reoffend, those behaviors that we are attempting to change. And that's what we'll talk about in case planning and so forth. And then your fourth generation, which is, which we're using in Dauphin County, which is the ORAS, the Ohio Risk Assessment System. It looks at static, dynamic, and case management systems. So when you look at fourth generation tools, what they're looking at is they're more multi-theory approach through the research. They tend to be gender specific at times. The ORAS is, and then we'll touch base a little bit on that. But then we're also looking at responsivity factors. Those factors that can be a barrier to really when it comes to case planning and risk reduction strategies with those individuals, whether it's child care needs, mental health needs, language issues, you're not very fluent in English, those type of factors, transportation, there are issues that we have to address when it comes to how that individual is going to be able to respond to treatment once those risk factors and criminogenic risk factors are identified. When you're looking at a screening tool, like we'll talk with Shannon with the pretrial tool, you're looking at a second generation type assessment. You're looking at static factors, a lot of research behind that. So you're looking at risk to reoffend or risk to fail to appear. So when you're looking at those type of screening tools, that's what you'll be looking at. So as we move on, so what is the risk needs responsivity model? They're looking at three core principles as it states: risk. And what is risk? Risk is the level of risk to reoffend. So we're going to match the level of service to that risk to reoffend. So when we talk about low, moderate, and high, we're going to tailor services a little bit differently for all three risk factors. And I'll talk a little bit about those later. Needs is really assessing those criminogenic needs and target through treatment. So we're going to identify those criminogenic needs. In the ORAS, we have, you're looking at seven factors, criminogenic factors that we'll look at. And some other LSIR has, I think, 8. Some of the other third and fourth generation tools may have anywhere from 6 to 10 different criminogenic risk factors. And just note, when you hear 6 to 10 different actually sometimes, like with the ORAS, they kind of take 2 and lump them into one category. So when you see variances between different risk tools, you may notice that. So really, we're looking at how to, targeting those through treatment, those needs, addressing them. And again, responsivity, providing treatment and tailoring interventions to the offender. Again, that's so critical, and I think that's where sometimes the ball is dropped when it comes to providing that treatment and not really addressing those responsivity factors. So the importance of the risk principle really is, who do we target? All right, that's the key strategy. And I want to emphasize what's really important, what we've been able to do in Dauphin County. When folks hear reentry, typically folks, look at reentry as, post prison release, on parole, some type of incarceration. We in Dauphin County look at reentry as the beginning of arrest, the onset of arrest, that first contact with the police department, and then their process through. So that's really, really important factor that our definition of reentry is really, starting from the beginning and the onset of arrest all the way through sentencing and release from further supervision. So if we look at level of supervision and treat and match the offender's likelihood to reoffend, that's really important. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Higher risk cases require more, again, intervention, structure, supervision, and resources. And you'll see how we in Dauphin County have really, concentrated on those moderate and high-risk population individuals. Focusing supervision and treatment resources on lower risk offenders can lead to wasted resources, and in some cases may actually increase risk. There's a lot of studies about this. Really low risk, and we'll talk again a little bit more about it, or tend to be self-correcting. They may have high needs. We can work with them and some of our community-based resources to address some of those needs. But otherwise, we tend to just leave them alone, and they're mostly self-correcting. And you'll see some of the statistics behind that as well. Now, importance of the need, again, stresses offenders' criminogenic needs to be addressed where a need exists, target with treatment and intervention. We're looking at dynamic and static factors. Again, static factors are things that don't change, age of arrest, gender, although, we live in a, society now that you can change those factors, no doubt. So we're cognizant of that. You can even change your criminal history if your record was expunged, all right? So that's another thing I kind of test people on about static factors that could change, especially if you're a juvenile and you've had your records expunged. So factors most strongly associated are attitudes, antisocial, people, antisocial personality, and antisocial behavior. And these are the four, what we call the four important criminogenic risk factors that are tied to the likelihood to recidivate. If any individual scores high in one of these areas, these are definitely the top four that we want to try to concentrate on. Again, additional risk factors: substance abuse, family, marital, relationship, education, employment, and lack of pro-social recreational activities. We're doing something interesting in the juvenile division. We're working with Gina Vincent, from UMass, and we're dealing with looking at protective factors and pro-social factors that really are associated with successive risk reduction and so forth. So really, really key information there. But some people say when you look at substance abuse, for example, well, why isn't substance abuse one of the top four criminogenic risk factors? Well, there's something causing them to use. What is it that's making them to use? Could it be their attitude towards society? I think all drugs should be legal. Okay, they might feel that's okay, or you're hanging around with the wrong individuals, or there's some underlying issue that is causing you to use drugs, for example. So that's really what we're trying to get at. What's driving that behavior, and that's the real key factor that we're looking at. Importance of responsivity. Again, treatment intervention should be tailored to the offender's learning style, motivation, developmental stage, and cognitive abilities. You've probably heard folks talk about pre-contemplative stage of change. We hear that a lot of juveniles, young adults, 18 to 24. Again, we talk about brain development, all those type of things, and you're seeing more of that pre-contemplative stage of change where they just don't want to, and that makes it really very difficult, and we have to work through that pre-contemplative stage of change with that individual. Treatment interventions most effective at reducing recidivism is cognitive behavior program. Again, identifying the driver and how we can change that driver, your thinking and the way you view whatever the situation is. And then addresses the question on how to target offenders to ensure successful intervention. And that's really, really a key factor is how do we target? And there's anything I emphasize through evidence-based practice you probably heard about is about fidelity, the integrity of the practices. Is that it's a well-scripted playbook, and like a doctor, you need to follow the whether it's the treatment that's being recommended, you follow it to a T based on research. So if you kind of you veer off or you throw something in that's not proven by research to be effective, it could break the fidelity, break that cycle of success with evidence-based practices. So when we discuss risk, several terminologies come to mind. We talk about prediction, forecasting, odds, likelihood, probability. And so when you look at these risk screening tools alone, again, mostly second generation. They don't have the criminogenic needs built into it. They don't have the dynamic factors built into it. So when you hear about risk factors, they are predictors, but it's predicted, or forecasting based on research on what we know research says about risk reduction, what we know to correlate with the risk to reoffend. So you'll hear a lot of that terminology in discussing risk. And it's not certain. There's no certainty to it, but based on research, and validation in several jurisdictions. I know we're going to have ours validated, and Shannon will talk a little bit about the pretrial screening tool, as well as our risk screening tool for the ORAS that we use at intake. So, but there's not certainty. But what it really does is the results of those risk assessments really ask the practitioner, we need to get further information, or do we need further information? So they're scoring at a higher level. That means we need to do a full-blown risk needs assessment to really determine what those risk factors are and the likelihood to reoffend. So risk screening tools, assessing risk to reoffend only. So why do we use a screening tool? Well, large populations like Class 3 counties like Dauphin, Philadelphia, being a higher class county, large jurisdictions, really risk screening tools are great. They can be, you can implement on a lot of folks, and as long as you're properly trained, which is, it's not very difficult to be trained in, you can take 10, 15 minutes to complete them. All right, that'll give you a low, in the ORAS, it'll give you a low or high score, okay? And then, you're looking at what type of cases. So you're looking at 6 months or more of supervision. Sometimes we do look at 4 to 6 months of supervision for certain cases. But 90 days or less, no assessment really is going to be helpful at all, because when we share what we do in terms of our practices internally, when you do a full CST, it's typically you have 60 days when the case is assigned to a probation officer until it's completed. Then you got to build your case plan. So targeting intervention, those type of services would not be, it's just not conducive in terms of how the system is set up. No matter where you're at, it's almost impossible to do anything in 90 days or less. So results of the screening tool, again, low or high, and there's overrides. So certain jurisdictions, for example, you can use juveniles, for example, for firearm charges. Might be their first contact. Never had a history before, come from a good family, whatever, but it could be a local practice where firearms are automatically, given a full assessment. Maybe you're detained to do an assessment, but really overrides are really important. The other issue of overrides is sex offenders. So one thing, and this is a whole different hour presentation I could give you on sex offenders in terms of where these risk needs responsivity assessments, we'll typically score them a low, and that's where some of the overrides are required when you look at some of those categories of offenses and individuals, where as a system with community protection, victimization, and so forth, we'll do an override, do a full-blown a full-blown assessment. Okay, and then local practices I spoke about. So let's look at the community supervision screening tool. So we have the pre-screener tool for the ORAS. And what it's looking at is when an individual is sentenced to probation, they come to our intake office and they are giving a community supervision screening tool. And these are the questions that they're giving on these tools, with this tool. Most serious arrests under 18 years of age, number of prior adult felony convictions, okay, and that's the key word, felony, received official misconduct while incarcerated as an adult. Well, so that could be if you were in pretrial status, you were in prison pending sentencing, your case, we would be able to look at any misconduct during that time. Of course, if you had a prior history, we would look at that as well. Prior sentence to community supervision as an adult, highest education, currently employed, current financial situation, we're looking in the past 6 months, and then drug use caused problems, and are you able to walk away from a fight? So that last one's a very interesting question. I usually have some eyebrows raised at that question, but again, all these are based on research. So when you look at, I know one of the questions that we're giving is which research data was used to validate these tools. So it's really an actuarial assessments being used. And really, when you look at actuarial assessments, they're based on empirical research. It systematically examines an issue. In our case, recidivism. That's what we're looking at. To reduce recidivism by analyzing large data sets, which known outcomes to determine which characteristics of the subject explain the various outcomes. So basically what they're saying is, why do certain offenders recidivate and others don't? All right, that's really what we're looking for in actuarial risk assessments. And these are all common risk factors that they look at that are associated with recidivism. So let's look at, and I know this is another question that was given by, whether it's DMC related, gender, but if you look in January 2019, these are stats that we have a quality assurance unit in the Dauphin County Probation Services. Mary Zurin, I know she's on this webinar, and she does a fantastic job with her unit. QA is really important with evidence-based practices. It looks at fidelity, integrity of the practices. Data is so important. Without data, we don't know if we're being successful. We need that data to collect. So let's look real quick at gender. This is just 1 month, January 2019. And usually each year I'll update these. Last year being a COVID year, our data is going to be a little bit different in terms of the numbers that we've collected, but we'll still be, sharing those. So you look at the males compared to females, and low and high. Again, with the risk assessment, with the Ohio Risk Assessment with the intake screening tool, is it only reveals a low or high score. Okay, but you can see this is the gender, and then this is the DMC statistics. If you look at Black or African American, 9% scored low, 23% scored high. Caucasian, 26 low, 41% high, and you can see the other factors there. And these are some of the statistics we have as it relates to DMC. And let's see, and then age. So if you look, now this is really interesting because most folks, if you look at what age group that tends to fall under high, most are going to say 18 to 24, all right, but typically it is your 25 to 34-year-old population. That's what most of the research will show is that's where your strain is on in your age categories in the criminal justice system. That really you're going to see a lot more of your highs and your moderates in that age group. But these are just some of the statistics you can see. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the community supervision tool. So in the way the ORAS works, if you score a high on the risk screening tool, then you're required to have a full-blown community service, what we call the community supervision tool, which is the 4th generation risk needs responsivity assessment. And that gets assigned to a probation officer where that individual resides. Our POs are assigned geographically, and they have 60 days, and we'll go through that to do the tool. Again, offenders' risk to reoffend that we're looking at. What's their likelihood of reoffending if we didn't do anything? And then what criminogenic needs that are identified as scoring high that we need to target to reduce recidivism. So let's look at the contents. So we have the contents, criminal history we're looking at, attitude, social attitude, antisocial attitude, excuse me, antisocial peers, antisocial personality. Again, not the mental health diagnosis type. That's really important to share. Excuse me. A family, education, employment, pro-social activities, and substance abuse. Those with the asterisks, again, are greatest association with recidivism and should be targeted for risk reduction. And they're really, really important. And they're all going to be cognitive behavior type programming around targeting those criminogenic needs, and that's the type of services we're going to be looking at. Okay, now let's talk about administering an assessment. One, we assign it as a pending assessment. The probation officer does a file review, office visit. We explain that's where we'll talk a little bit about professional alliance in a little bit, but professional alliance is really, really important with implementation of any evidence-based practice program, especially the assessment. Being able to explain to them why they're doing this assessment and what's the purpose. There's a self-report questionnaire. All right, the self-report questionnaire is something that the individual completes, And it's good that, when they do that, because then you can compare it with your results once you have the one-on-one interview with the individual. You'll be able to decipher if they were being honest with what they reported on the questionnaire compared to the answer you receive throughout the assessment interview. A home visit's really important. We need to look at the, home where, again, neighborhoods, those type of things where you reside are associated with risk reduction strategies. And then interview with the offender, and then the scoring. So again, a lot of work takes place in this. Our officers, after being trained, when we first started this, it took probably almost an hour and a half to do the assessment with the individual and then scoring it. But to do all this now, you have to do a lot of it in the front end. But once they sit down with the offender, go through the questions and score it, they have it down within an hour, 45 minutes to hour. Some are a little bit better, when they do a lot, it becomes very fundamental and instinctual for them to complete. So, start to finish, our policy is 60 days. It must be done within 60 days. Our folks, I think, and Meredith can always chime in, I think we've been pretty good, roughly about 35 to 40 days is our average of folks getting this done. And we're really pleased with that. The sooner the better with that. So, any questions up to this point? Okay, let's talk about professional lines. This is one of the 4 core practices, that's really, really instrumental in the success of anything that we do in any business, whether you're in retail world, into our world. Really, professional alliance is really important. But as it relates to probation and corrections, it's really the alliance between the officer and offender has a large effect on outcomes. Outcomes, and they're best when the alliance is characterized by effective use of authority, fair but firm. As a probation officer, you're explaining your role as a probation officer, what your responsibilities are to the court. And that listen, I want to work with you. I want to be fair with you. I want to help you get through this. But at times, I need to be firm, and I'm going to call you out when you're having these type of issues. Role modeling and reinforcement is so crucial. What we're doing is the role modeling piece, and there's another advanced thing that we're doing that the adult probation officers really trained in. The juvenile POs are already trained in effective practices in community supervision, which is called EPICS out of University of Cincinnati. It's really the EVP on steroids, we call it, and this is really a skill set that probation officers are provided with that really role models, reinforces from one session to the next, all cognitive behavior programming type intervention. It's really good stuff. Concrete problem solving, engage offender in resolving obstacles. We talk about breaking the chain of thought processes and behaviors, and then active use of community resources. And I will tell you, active use of community resources is still something we're struggling with in Dauphin County, and most adult probation departments throughout the state continue to struggle with community resources because of the lack of funding. In the juvenile world, it's great because we have the needs-based plan and budget. We get many millions of dollars a year for children and youth and juvenile probation services, so that we don't lack those resources in the community. But in the adult, we do, and that's one of our challenges. And quality of the relationship. Again, trust and mutual respect. The way you speak to an individual under supervision, and the trust in the fact as a probation officer, you're going to do what you say you're going to do, make sure you follow through. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, one of the 4 core correctional competencies and includes motivational interview. MI is a really big, intrinsic interview is a really big skill set as it relates to evidence-based practices. Motivation alone is not a risk reduction skill set. It has to be used in conjunction with all of your other skills like cognitive behavior programming, this professional alliance. Technically, in research, they really did do a study of just if you did motivational interview alone, it has less than a 15% likelihood to reduce recidivism. But again, that's not broken up on low, moderate, or high risk individuals you're using. So, but it's effective in terms of your other skill sets that you're or skill practices you'll be implementing. So let's talk about a low risk offender. All right. So if the score, so in the ORAS, a score of 0 to 14 would put you, as well as a female, 0 to 14 will put you at a low risk to reoffend. So you complete the assessment, they score a 10. Okay, that gets assigned to one of our reduced officers. And reduced officers are really responsible for low risk offender caseloads. Low risk offenders, again, they're self-correcting. All right, less than 100 hours of intervention and programming is not even required, but can be implemented for those that have really high needs. You can reduce those. You could provide that program, but otherwise, you know, really, a lot of the times you just don't really need to do anything with them in terms of intervention. Dosage requirements for office. Now think about this. Once every 3 months in the office, they do an office visit. And we increase dosage for violations. So if someone's struggling, maybe tested positive again, struggling with addiction, not reporting or having issues, we may increase that frequency to once a month. You probably heard graduated responses, and that's something that's really important. You know, dealing with immediate action when it comes to sanctions, as well as incentives for good behavior and doing well. So that's another important piece of evidence-based practice. And field contacts aren't required. Now, think about a low-risk offender before doing the ORAS, when they were identified using a first-generation really approach, professional judgment, based on charges and history. A low-risk offender was typically seen once in the field, once in the office sometimes, you know. So so you can imagine when I share statistics with you on what most jurisdictions see as a percentage of low, moderate, and high-risk categories, you're gonna see the valuable time that we're saving and concentrating on moderate and high-risk offenders, because again, they're self-correcting. So we see them every 3 months in the office, and they also do mail report or web-based portal report every month. They have to answer a few series of questions and submit it to the probation officer. That's another way the probation officer monitors the individual. But the key is we don't go out to the house, and we only see them once every 3 months. But this is what research says that you can do with a low-risk caseload. One person. Now, some of you are like, I don't think so, but 500 to 1,000 individuals that they can actually supervise on a caseload. I will tell you, I never want to get there. We do a pretty good job. Our reduced officers are around 200 on average, and that's definitely doable. They do a great job with it, but research says that you can handle, an individual can handle 500 to 1,000. But again, that's as long as there's certain things like web-based reporting or mail reporting as other options. And you change your office practices to once every 3 months instead of maybe once every month. Maybe you might have been doing. All right, let's talk about moderate risk offenders. Again, they're assigned, and the scoring range for them is 15 to 23 for males and 15 to 21 for females. Again, the fourth generation tool looks at gender specific as well as multi-theory approach. You won't find that with the third generation tools. Now, moderate risk offenders require up to 200 hours of intervention and programming. Dosage requirements. Now, when I say 200 hours of intervention, again, a lot of this is cognitive behavior programming. Okay, you're going to receive. Now, realistically, for an individual to get up to 200 hours of intervention with lack of resources is difficult. But we do our best, again, as we build more skill sets for our probation officers like ethics and so forth, we'll be able to get more and build our resources out in the community to provide more services to try to achieve that 200 hour recommendation. But look at our dosage requirements. 3 contacts per month, 1 in the office, 1 in the field, and 1 collateral. Collateral could be a wife, employer, neighbor, family member, those type of individuals. But again, a moderate risk offender prior to ORAS, you were seeing them, Meredith, shake your head up, I'm right, maybe 3 times a month in the field. somewhere like that. So, and an office visit. So, you know, that was cumbersome, especially when our probation officers were averaging about 100 to 110 cases of a mixture of low, moderate, and high. And then increased doses for violation, again, graduated responses. And the caseload size here ideally is up to 50. All right, and when I say 50, this is 50 moderate risk offenders they're looking at. Now let's look at the high risk scores. Requires up to 300 hours of intervention programming, 5 contacts per month, 2 office personnel, 2 field personnel, and 1 collateral. Again, we were probably doing 5 or 6, you know, at least 5, 4, maybe 4 or 5 in the field. And Meredith, were we doing like 2 office visits a month prior to DRS? Yeah, so you can see that's a lot of work. And increased doses for violation. Caseload size is 23. Now, when you look at our specialty courts, for a great example, drug court, vet court, that's where we try to keep those caseloads, all right? And it works. You can see now there's a much more enhancement to a team approach that these specialty courts have. We have those additional resources, but ideally for the probation office, you want to keep it within those numbers. And we're seeing success with that. And then we have the very high risk scores. And just so you know, for the male, it's 24 to 33 points for a high, and then 22 to 28 is a moderate for a female. So there's only high in the females, and not a very high like the males have. And the high level is 29 plus for a female. So we have low, moderate, and moderate for females. Again, very high up to 300 hours. Look at the contacts per month. Again, very intensive, a lot of this, you know, accountability, community protection, but also, you know, following up with all services and so forth as outlined in the case plan. 2 office visits, 3 field personals, and 1 collateral. But look at the caseload size. So understand, in Pennsylvania, county probation and parole, average caseload is 132 cases across the board. All right, and that's 132 cases. Some jurisdictions are just moderate and highs. Some are a mixture of moderate highs and lows. But you can understand that's a lot, and that's why it's very, very difficult. When it comes to evidence-based practices, it's really, and I mean this sincerely, it's great on paper. When it comes to volume of individuals, it becomes very difficult, and as well as the resources. So let's look at, I'm going to give you some statistics on Dauphin County assessments. And thanks to our QA team. Look at our low-risk population. Right now, based on the first 3,000 assessments we've completed, 33% scored out as a low. National average is not 35 to 45%. So we're a little, and that's not uncommon to be a little bit out of the norm, okay, with that. But this is what you're looking for. In most jurisdictions, the research shows that your low population is going to be in that percentage realm. And then moderate risk offenders, we had 58%. So we had 3% above what is the national average. And then our high risk, 9%, national average no more than 12%. So you know, the question is, okay, well, why are you out of that national average? Well, one thing you need to consider is, the first thing you look at is inter-rater reliability. All right, are we doing the assessments correctly as we're trained to do? And what I'm really proud of what QA does, and why it's important with anything with evidence-based practices, we do random samplings, you know, monthly, where we take so many cases. I think we've only taken about 10 or so cases, and the ORAS instructors review them and score them as well based on the information they receive. So if all 20 of you that's on this call, webinar, interviews the same individual, you should all come out the same risk level, plus minus 3 points. Right? If you get outside of that, there might be a training issue. It might be an issue where we require to do boosters every year that we'll use it. Well, maybe there's a question that we're seeing routinely being answered inaccurately or confusing people, those type of things. We use those as training tools as our booster trainings. But so these are your national average, but we use things like inter-rater reliability, again, boosters to ensure. Also, you know, we're just looking at, you know, timeframes when they're scored and the histories. And just there's a lot of different factors that could go into why it might be a little different, but this is my point is to show you what the national averages look like. Overrides, it talked about sex offenders. So you can see overrides, 8% of these assessments were overridden, 5.5% of those were sex offenders. So real quick about what we see in sex offenders. If you look at the criminogenic risk factors, family, education, attitudes and orientations, a lot of sex offenders come from, are well educated, have good jobs, come from pretty decent families. So there's a lot of those factors that you look in, and that they will typically score low. I mean, they follow the rules. They're just opportunists a lot, especially when it comes to grooming and so forth. I don't try to talk about it as a sex offender expert. I dislike those type of cases. I'm just glad we have professionals that are willing to take those assignments, and they're very difficult ones. But they're just some of the background behind sex offenders that we see in research why they score low. And Meredith used to be working the sex offender unit, correct?
I did. Yes, I did.
Yes. So bless you. Thanks for doing that. All right. So supervision practices to prior to risk assessment. What slide am I on? I'm 24 because I'm going to have Shannon come up here shortly. So we do a reassessment. Okay, reassessments are really, really important. So what they tell you to do is reassessment at least 6 months has elapsed since the initial assessment or last assessment, or if there's a new offense, technical violations, and annually. So basically what we do in Dauphin County, based on the volume, and it's okay to do research, we do it annually unless a new offense or technical violation in at least 5 to 6 months has elapsed since that last assessment. Because what we're going to see is that their risk scores may have changed, their criminogenic risk factors may have changed, so we need to identify that so we can case plan around that or tailor our recommendation for the court based on our findings. So that's why it's important. And then annually we do. Also, if after so long, if the probation office feel the individual's doing what they need to do, they hold their job, they're back with their family, they're making their appointments, they're testing clean, all those factors, and enough time has gone by, maybe, I always like to say a good year, maybe 9 months, and they feel that their risk level is now lower, then the probation officer is going to have ask for approval to do another assessment and to see if that is true. And if it is true, then they may go from a moderate risk level to a low risk individual, and then we can send them off to a reduced officer case level. And again, that's like graduated response. If I can go from a moderate to a low, that means I don't have to come see you at my house anymore. I just need to report every 3 months. And then case closing. Again, case closing is paramount because, again, we need to measure, is this working? What we're doing, is it working? And that's where you have the data, and that's where reassessments are critical. So very, very important. I do a whole thing on pre-sentence investigations, a lot of judicial education seminars with the common pleas judges. And I think we're getting there in Dauphin County where we have more judges using the ORAS pre-sentence investigation report format, which is, I think, they find really helpful. So reassessments can help with the court with, again, for our probation officer to make a recommendation to the court at the revocation hearing, aids in sentencing, again, looking at risk level and identifying criminogenic needs. For example, if you have an individual pre-sentence investigation score as a low, all right, and the sentencing guideline says, let's just throw something out there, 6 to 24 months, all right, this may help the judge tailor on the lower end of that. Or maybe even make, exception where they don't serve any period of incarceration. But again, these are just, aids in sentencing. Plus, the important piece is, unlike the juvenile, in the juvenile world, when we get to receive the charge, the probation officer does all the fact-finding investigation, builds a social summary, presents the whole case to the court. Where in adult probation, we typically get them post-sentencing. So a lot of this isn't done, where we can tailor our recommendation for the court at the onset for Johnny to go to a cognitive behavior programming at the GEO group, for example, things like that. We have 30 days to request to amend the order, but again, we're still not getting the assessment done within that 30 days. So that's why pre-sentence investigations are really important to include the risk needs responsivity assessment. And court order programs. So again, we can court order those programs. So now that we talk about the case plan, the purpose of the case plan. So when all this is done, the assessment is done, we're able to build a case plan around the 2 top scoring criminogenic needs. Okay, we're going to start with those 2 highest scores. Say it's antisocial behavior or antisocial peers. Let's say antisocial peers and family. So we're going to work on those 2. So the purpose of the case plan, again, identify and address the driver. What are the drivers resulting in criminal behavior and you scoring high in those areas? And what are the responsivity factors? All right, maybe you couldn't hold a job because you don't have consistent transportation. Your public transportation doesn't come, it's not accessible where your location is. Excuse me. We're going to look at strengths, triggers, and stage of change. All right, this is really important. 5 really important factors of the case plan. And target the 2 highest scoring, as I stated. We're going to do activities, goals, and target dates. And I'm going to give you an example. And we do build a service matrix. So when you look at each criminogenic need based on the risk factors, it'll provide you a resource, what's out there that can help address those or target those risk factors. That service matrix is really good. We use the SMART goals. Again, specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and time-based. Really important when you deal with this. So let's take an attitudes and orientation. Okay, they score high. This is one of the case planned goals that we're going to work on. Here's the problem statement. I have an attitude that gets me in trouble. No one is going to control me. The goal is to reduce one of my most potent risk factors that can lead to criminal behavior, increase my ability to communicate my needs effectively to authority figures. Again, think about someone with, maybe having a problem with their boss. Improve my awareness and understanding of motivation. So that's the goal. Here's the probationary strategy. It's going to be attend and complete a cognitive behavior skills class, list ways in which my beliefs influence my emotions and behavior, and share with PO at next meeting, accept responsibility for my action with no excuses. At each month's probation meeting, list examples of how cognitive skills have been utilized by me. Again, when each visit you're building upon, okay, you're building upon, again, the whole cognitive skill approach. And use empathy as a tool to affect open communication. So this is something that the probationer is going to work with the probation officer, and these are built in collaboration with the probationer. All right, this is not something the PO says. This is what you're going to do. We're going to talk together and build a strategy on how we can reduce and meet those goals. And this is the PO strategy, and this is where fair, firm trust of a probation officer is that you need to follow through. Discuss long-term goals and the impact attitude has on achieving those goals. Discuss what consequences, attitudes, values, and behaviors have had on others. Reinforce positive statements and behaviors. Again, refer to cognitive behavior intervention group. Again, whether it's a GEO group or another program, we make that referral. All of our referrals go through QA. They keep all the stats. We look at measurable goals. Did they complete the program? Did they recidivate? We do recidivism studies for 2 years out on things. So again, we're looking at to make sure things are working. But reinforce positive statements of behavior. Again, this is the whole positive behavior that you present. For every negative, you're responding for every four positives with that individual. And that's really, really important dialogue to have with the individual probationer. For example, Johnny gets tests high again, but he's been clean for so long. It's really, Johnny, you've done a great job. You're going to counseling. You've been clean for 3 months. You've rekindled your relationship with your daughter. You have a job. you maintain for 3 months now, good paying job, identifying those positive things. But now we have this issue we got to deal with. We're going to work with you through this, but we're going to identify what drove you to use again. So again, just having those type of cognitive behavior dialogue is really great. Talking about motivational interviewing being very important. Techniques to reduce resistance, and really dealing with the ambivalence to change. That's really what MI does. Focuses on the individual assets, attempting to build those strengths to accomplish the justice-related objectives. We also have the brief intervention tools. These are quick exercises you can do. We're not doing them in adult yet, but but that's something we'll get to. These are very quick homework assignments you can do with the individual if they have a step back. Again, we talked about ethics. And then cognitive behavior programming and the supervisor's briefcase. This is something where supervisors build their skill sets when it comes to working with repeaters around case plan, motivational interviewing, rewards and sanctions, those type of things. It gives the supervisors those skill sets. And then core competencies, which we talked about. So based on everything I said, I want to put this in a medical analogy, okay? You see, medical attention is required. So when we have an ailment, we don't know what it is, what do we typically do? We go to a doctor's, right? All right, well, that's the criminal activity. So there's criminal activity going on, but we don't know what's causing it. All right, what's causing that? Well, we do, in the doctor's office, we'll do an examination, do some testing, and in the criminal justice world, we're going to do the R&R, which is the Risk Needs Responsivity Assessment, which is the ORAS. That's going to give us our assessment of what's going on and our findings. It's going to be our risk level and those needs. Our finding is he's a moderate risk offender and to get rearrested, and these are the needs. These are criminogenic needs that are identified, and if we don't address those, most likely he is going to recidivate. So that moves into what treatment recommendation or prescription we're going to prescribe to them, all right? For us, it's really targeting those criminogenic needs, getting those interventions in place to target those criminogenic needs to reduce risk. So what does most patients do? They follow the doctor's orders, right? Well, it's not always so easy in the criminal justice system, but I will say that's our strategy. That is the strategy we use when you look at an analogy, that the ailment, the criminal behavior is an ailment. We need to do some testing. We need to dig a little deeper what's causing it. And then once we find out, let's put that case plan into place and let's correct those identified criminogenic needs in order to reduce risk. With that said, I want to take the time to have Shannon take over a little bit to talk about the pretrial assessment that they're using, the Allegheny tool. We're really excited. We've been using it for, I think, about 2 years now, correct? Testing and piloting and so forth.
Yeah.
So I'll let her talk about it. So Shannon, take it away.
Okay, yeah, as Chad's been discussing risk in most of his segment, he wanted me to chime in a little bit on the work that we're doing on the pretrial level to assess and address risk. As he said, re-entry starts at arrest, and we often call our segment pre-entry instead of re-entry, but that's just being cute, I think, sometimes. He talks a lot about risk and how we're addressing that on the front end. So we started looking at a pretrial risk assessment to help address that risk as soon as possible. So the pretrial risk assessments in general, obviously, are supposed to be done as soon as the person's arrested and brought to the booking center, and then before they're actually going in front of the judge, so that we can compile all the information so that when the judge does the arraignment, they have as much information in their hands as possible. It's just considered one more tool in the toolbox that they can use when assessing bail. You don't build a house with just nails, and this is part of the nail. So we would do the assessment at the booking center before the judge arraigns them, and the whole idea is to measure the risk for failure to appear or new criminal activity. Some tools will also measure a risk of violence. Some of those are still debated, and to the sense that a lot of people think that those tools actually elevate the other risk values as well, as far as risk for failure to appear and new criminal activity. But you also want to have something in your jurisdiction that sort of fits. The one thing that risk assessments don't do on the pretrial level is address and measure needs. A lot of that is simply because bail is supposed to be a short period of time. Usually probation, there's a significant period of time. However, when someone's on bail, it can be less than 30 days. And that's not enough time to really assess needs and address those. And it is also addressing the issue that people who are out on bail are still innocent until proven guilty. So if you start addressing needs, you run the risk of over-conditioning somebody who's out on bail and essentially setting them up to fail when they're still innocent. So instead what it does is it just gives a statistical value on what we're measuring risk instead of asking the judge to set bail on a gut feeling. So now he has a statistical measure on the defendant and what he might be able to do while out on bail. So when we started looking at risk assessments on the pretrial end, of course we wanted to join in with the ORAS assessment system because it just made sense. It's a cradle to grave system. However, just like anything else, it says one size fits all, but that's not always true. And the biggest key factor is you want to make sure that the tool that you're using is measuring what you consider risk to be. So what we were seeing was a lot of our judges were not feeling that that tool was in fact addressing what they considered to be risk. And they had some real concerns on how that was really going to pan out in our community. So we took a step back and we started, evaluating some other tools, and we decided, maybe it would be a good idea to consider a different tool instead of the ORAS, because if nothing else, we don't want to sour the judges on the idea of a risk assessment in general. We don't want to poison that well. We want to give them the tool that they can work with, that they think actually measures what they're looking for. So we made an agreement. We'll look at other tools, and we decided on the Allegheny County tool. The biggest reason for doing that is it had already been validated and actually revalidated in the state of Pennsylvania. The critical piece to that means that a felony in Allegheny County is also going to be a felony in Dauphin County. If we were to use, for instance, the Virginia tool, a felony might not be a felony in Pennsylvania where it is in Virginia, and that messes up with the scores, and you have to redo the tool a little bit to make sure that you're measuring the same things. So it made it a nice, simple transition with a tool that's already been validated in our state. It also offers a practical guide for the judges, because so many of these risk assessment tools will offer an assessment of low, medium, or high. But for a judge, that doesn't tell them what kind of bail that would mean. One judge, a low bail might be $5,000. To another judge, a low bail would just be ROR or maybe $500. So we were seeing some disparity and some concern from the judges that, well, that really doesn't help me set bail. It just tells me what the risk is. What does that mean in terms of bail? Whereas the Allegheny Risk Tool actually gives recommendations for release, whether it's ROR, 2 different levels of pretrial release, or no release at all if they're a very high value. So we've been using the tool for about 3 years now. With COVID, of course, that threw a big monkey wrench in the process of doing that, but it was also a nice break for us so that we could actually start the work of validating that tool. We were working with Dr. Lee, who's been contracted to help us look at our risk assessments and help validate them, and also in the background develop a tool of our own if the need be, if it worked out that the Allegheny tool really wasn't measuring risk as accurately as we had liked. So we have that work ongoing. The risk assessments are being reinstituted at the booking center. They're up and running, and I know some of our judges are really excited to have them back. But we are in the process of validating the tool for our jurisdiction. So hopefully by the next Criminal Justice Connects presentation, which will be me again in May, I might have some numbers for you and some more information on what we're doing with risk assessments in Dauphin County. But that's the general gist of what we're doing here in Dauphin County to assess risk way back at the beginning at the point of arrest.
Thanks, Jen. Again, we're really excited at the pretrial stage. A lot of jurisdictions aren't using any tool at all. I know one thing of the good, the bad, the ugly, which I'll get into. One thing with pretrial and Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not going to give the percentage, but your numbers have gone up a lot
Oh, yes.
since the use of this tool, which for us, it's a good thing. That means they're not in prison. Okay,
Absolutely.
so, and that's the goal we wanted. We also know that we want to make sure her staff's not being overburdened at the same time, but we've seen a big spike in pretrial numbers. Again, that's a good and a not so good in terms of resources what you have. So, but you guys have been handling it very well. You guys done a great job with it.
Well, we've had a lot of support. Our numbers did go up. We went from about 1,400 cases prior to the risk assessments to over 1,900 cases in using the risk assessment. They're holding steady at that right now. Maybe with the risk assessment going back into play, those numbers might spike a little again, but it does also help reflect the prison count. The prison count went down when we started using risk assessments, and that was really important.
And that's the objective. So it's good
Absolutely.
stuff. Again, we're really pleased with the direction Dauphin County is going in. We still have a lot of work to do. Some barriers that continue to contend with it, but with anything you do that is shown promising results, it's never easy. So but we continue as a reentry county with all the things that we're doing. We're really doing a good job aligning ourselves with all the well-practiced research practices and implemented, practices that we're doing. And I think we're really on our way to success. We're already seeing the numbers. Any questions for Shannon? Okay. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, so one thing that's really good about the risk assessment is the wealth of information you get on onset. Meredith will tell you, as a probation officer in the adult, I spent most of my career in the juvenile as a probation officer in the field, but it would take you pretty much a year almost to get all the information out of an individual that you get on the assessment. And you get in that assessment, you get it in 60 days. So we're getting a lot of that really critical information that we need for risk reduction early on, instead of learning as we go as we supervise those individuals. It provides offender classification. And one thing I did want to mention, the reason we selected the ORAS, not just because it was a fourth generation tool, but it had a suite of tools used at, again, pretrial, prison intake, reentry, community supervision. So that's why we selected our probation, our work release center staff, our prison staff. Members of there are trained on these tools. And again, it's great for when you look at offender classification. It can be used to, again, your low, moderate, high risk, as well as identifying those services that might need be, as we talk about maximizing resources. And the other thing is an objective approach. It's not subjective. It really takes, let me just be clear, professional judgment is still required when you do these assessments. The experience is still necessary, but it really takes more of that subjectivity out of the equation. It's really more of an objective approach. Structured case plan, supervision plan. Again, we are doing a test, an empirical test. It's known to work in reducing risk. That's our test, and that's giving us information so we can provide a treatment plan or a prescription to reduce the likelihood to reoffend. And lower caseloads, and I'll share those a little bit later. Again, our rewards and sanction matrix. I tell you, rewards and sanction matrix is difficult to build. One, rewards requires funding. It might be taking the family to the movies, or dinner night, or public transportation, those type of things. You still need the financial resources to provide some of those things. The good continues. We target those criminogenic needs. Again, the test revealed certain issues that's causing that ailment. Now we're going to work on it. Contact requirements, court recommendation, reduces recidivism. We know that. We'll share that. Reduce the prison population, as Shannon showed, even just through the pretrial tool, we were able to reduce that population, as well as technical violations and so forth. We'll talk about the bad. It really requires time. So to be successful with the implementation of evidence-based practice, the core 8 principles of risk reduction, it typically takes any jurisdiction a minimum of 5 years. And that's very tough to gain. We're seeing in Pennsylvania, we're seeing anywhere from 6 to 7 years to fully from the 4 stages that you're looking at, from, all the way from organizational readiness to the assessment to skill building, all the way to data collection and outcomes we're looking at. So it requires a lot of time. Training, lots of training, okay? We talk about boosters. Almost every evidence-based practice skill set that the probation officers are trained on require annual boosters. So you're always, again, remember, fidelity. It's like a doctor, a heart surgeon. Do you think he gets his, med degree and that's it? He's got to constantly go, get retrained or look at new innovations and techniques in his world, in his or her world. So it takes a lot of cost. We've been very fortunate cost-wise to get PCCD grant funding through a lot. We're working on the adult system under PCCD, under the County Adult Probation and Parole Advisory Committee, CAPPAC. It's the acronym for that. When you hear that, that's what that's for. We no longer fall under the state, the Board of Probation. Our funding now comes from PCCD, but they're going to be, generating more fundings for some of those smaller counties and counties that are not fully up and running yet on evidence-based practices, but cost is definitely an importance. Collaboration with key stakeholders. This is very, very critical. Early on, when we did this, you would have thought when I was talking about evidence-based practices to some of our key stakeholders, I had, 3 heads. So it was just like, it's new jargon, it's a new practice. But when you really, again, if you look at that medical analogy I use, it's all we're doing. We're using research-based science that's known to have a correlating effect on a correlating positive effect on the work that we're doing. So that's really, really key, getting your key stakeholders involved. Maintaining the fidelity, you heard about that. Setting up internal practices to ensure fidelity is there. Data collection, that's why we need that's why we have a QA unit, and we're seeing more and more counties. Meredith will say they're constantly calling us up. How did you develop your QA unit? We want to start one, but this is where it's really, really important. The bad also is the court process. You heard me say it. If you don't do it, and this is why I'm really big on the pre-sentence investigation, including the ORAS, is that if we're able to get that information to the judiciary at sentence, we can tailor the recommendation and so for a better path to success. And then the other things, available programs to target criminal gang needs. Again, we still lack those services. We are dealing with our community-based providers or some of the nonprofit organizations that are out there helping the reentry population to work with Dauphin County to get some of those programs aligned with evidence-based practices. Organizational readiness. I'm never afraid to share this. When I took over adult probation and wanted to implement evidence-based practices, there were some staff members that wanted me out. They didn't want to hear this. They didn't want to have anything to do about it. All right. It was not good. But as with anything in life that's can provide the results that we're doing, it's not easy. It's not easy to accomplish. It's a cultural change of doing things you're doing 20 years, completely a paradigm shift into a more, comprehensive, analytical, research-based approach that we're doing. We had staff resistance. I think, Meredith, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think probably in the first 18 to 24 months, we probably had 20 to a little over 20 probation officers resign, leave. They just didn't want anything to do with it.
Yes.
Right? And that's not a bad thing. If you have folks not buying into it, I get that. All right. Then we brought new staff in, and then our new staff have been very, very successful with this. Stakeholder buy-in. Again, getting your courts, your DA, public defenders, all your community-based programs, your county categorical agencies all involved. Stakeholder buy-in is important. We can only do so much as probation. But if you don't have those other key stakeholders involved, we're not going to be successful. Financial sustainability. We are fortunate here in Dauphin County where we have a board of commissioners who've been around for a long time that are very entrenched in what we do day in and day out. and they've been very supportive along with the court providing that funding for us for some of those services. Let's talk about some of the success that we've had. Prior to starting the ORAS, total number of cases were 7,100. Field supervision caseloads were 98. 18 months after using it, actually, this is funny, in a sense, the cases went up to 100, but look at our average field caseload size, 67. All right, now what that means is that's 67 high and moderate risk offenders. All right, still above what they recommend for an average caseload for that population, but we're doing very well. We are probably, and my colleagues throughout the state kind of pick on me a little bit, like, oh, Dauphin, you guys got the number of probation officers. Well, again, that's a supportive board of commissioners and a supportive court. That's why we get where we're at. We've been able to get that support, and we're saving a lot of money as a county with the additional probation officers, reducing the prison population, reducing recidivism, therefore crimes against victims and the community. So our field supervision is 67. I know some of my colleagues that are just as well as advanced as we are with EVP implementation. They're still about 90 to 100 moderate and high risk offenders. So we're really pleased with that. Look at our technical violations have decreased by 25%. I am pleased to announce last year alone in 2020, no one was detained for a financial violation, not paying fines or costs. We don't do that. All right, that's we have a monetary compliance unit. That's another thing we built. Monetary compliance unit for those that have completed all their other court conditions other than monetary, outside of restitution for a mom and pop business or individual victim. Their case can be closed out of traditional probation supervision, and then they're just monitored monthly by the monetary compliance unit to set up a payment plan and do that and make sure they're maintaining their payments. And that really has helped with reducing the number of offenders on our caseloads, because they've done with everything else. Unfortunately, they still have some financial fines and so forth to pay off. New arrests decreased by 15%. And look at our recidivism rate for low-risk offenders, 9.7%. So all those low-risk offenders, I think this was a 2015 study of all low-risk offenders that were closed out successfully, 9.7 of them offended. All right, and that's great. That's a great stat. Staff morale is up. I mean, again, with anything, EVP takes time. It really does. No matter how experienced you are, it still takes time. So you still get some staff that might be busy. I got a couple court cases. I got to get out in the field, but now I got to do this ORAS yet. I mean, that's human behavior. But overall, our morale is up. And I really, truly believe, and Meredith can contend that they respect what we're doing. They get what we're doing. Even some of the staff that may not be totally buy-in, but they understand from an analogy perspective why we're doing this. It beats throwing a string of spaghetti against the wall and hope it sticks, right? We got something that it will stick if it's done right. Case planning, again, it's a new way of thinking. We used to just do a regular supervision plan, i.e. get in for curfew at soda time, maintain the job, and pay your fines. That was it. But now we have a more comprehensive risk reduction approach. Prison population has gone down. Public perception that we are change agents. I always like to really have our community believe, and again, it's a way we have our dialogue with the individuals that come under our supervision, is that we're change agents. That's what we look at, and we're talking behavior change agents. We're not here, it's not all about community protection, but if you address these criminogenic needs, it achieves the ultimate success of community protections, because it's going to reduce risk. But it's really about working with the individual, get them on the path of success, and get them moved on. Again, and then the training. Again, the more training we go through, it's great to hear how involved our probation staff have become, how educated they are, and I'm really proud of our QA unit and our other instructors through evidence-based practices have really been instrumental. I know Shannon and even Judge Winter will tell you, and Catherine, the trainings we've done for our stakeholders, and in Pennsylvania alone, and I'm really proud of this, and this isn't about me, this is about our team. We're looked at as the most progressive and well-advanced evidence-based practice department in the state. We're really highly regarded for all the good work that we do. We have a lot of counties that piggyback off of us, and I don't blame them. I like to piggyback off other counties' successes as well. Why reinvent the wheel? So I'm really proud of what we've done and where we came, especially as relates to CJAB and reentry. So real quick, do we have any questions at this point? I'm just going to talk real quick about information at sentencing. This is something, again, I've been doing judicial education seminars with the judges throughout the Commonwealth, helping them, be able to use risk needs responsibility assessments at sentencing. Really just utilizing data-driven approach. I'm going to kind of skim through this real quick, so I apologize. I know we had 10 minutes. I'm the president of the Juvenile Chiefs Association. I got our quarterly meetings going on, so I got to be on a call at 1:30, so I apologize. Implementing evidence-based strategies can increase public safety while holding offenders accountable. Defenders' risk and needs can enable the criminal justice system, again, divert offenders from the prison. And then results of risk needs assessment can enhance the quality of judges' sentencing decisions for those offenders eligible for community supervision. Real quick, older models of supervision. You could emphasize punishment through incarceration. Whoops, how do I get back to that? Sorry. Generate general deterrence through the adoption of tough on crime policies. We don't need to mention California, what that did to them, the 3-strike rule, renting correctional institutions in New Mexico, Arizona, Washington, kind of backfire. Truth in sentencing, determinate sentencing, and 3-strike laws that I mentioned. Truth in sentencing, you look at Virginia in 1992, all the sentence of incarceration, you had to serve at least 80% of incarceration before you were even eligible for parole. And that was just such a burden on their system. Punishments too severe, sentences too long, dramatic increase in the incarceration rate. Between 1920 and 1970, 110 per 100,000 people in terms of the imprisonment rate. Look at mid to late 70s, steady increase to current rate of 500 per 100,000. And then between 1974 and 2005, the number of inmates in federal state prisons increased from roughly 215,000 to more than 1.5 million. All right. And correctional spending, 200%, excuse me. Education spending, 3% in that same time period. Again, we just found a system that was broken. We needed to do something as a society, and federally, that's what's been done and where we're at. So, purpose of these assessments, pre-sentence investigation, again, aid the court determine appropriate sentence, designed to frame factual and legal issues for sentencing, designate the appropriate institution where the offender will serve their sentence. It could be, for example, used to be drug and alcohol services through DOC, what have you, could be tailored for that. Offenders' eligibility or needs for specific correctional programs, aids the probation officer in supervision. All right, so we know early on that assessment's done, we can start our case plan right after sentencing and start working with that individual. Again, what's the primary objective? Focus on the character of the defendant by offering insight into the psychosocial, cultural, and physical factors that have influenced his or her development and the factors of the specific offense. Only true and accurate facts will accomplish this objective. So in the new model of sentencing, we talked about, you've heard me talk about all these, and then improving judicial decision-making by identifying sentences and treatment that are most effective. And then we have help sort out which offenders should receive incarceration, intense supervision, diversion, inpatient care. Is not intended, this is really, really crucial, is not intended to limit judicial discretion, but instead to be better inform judicial decision makers by identifying who to target, what to target, and how to target. And that's the real key with it. Ensuring the lowest level of recidivism and the best possible ability of offender change. So let's look real quick at the legal information. What we typically see in a pre-sentence investigation prior to EVP and risk needs responsibility, a juvenile adult record, well, criminal history, criminogenic area that we look at on the assessment. Probation parole history, again, criminal history. Official version of the offense. That could fall under what their attitudes, their beliefs, their peer associates, their behavior. All that can be captured under the official version of the offense. We talk about, I can't stand when old people drive. They drive so slow. I'm tired. I'm just going to run them off the road. So they have this belief about a certain group, which can help determine where their mindset is and their thinkings are. Custody status, criminal history, pending status, criminal history. Co-defendants, again, co-defendant, antisocial peers, substance abuse history, physical health, leisure, recreation, and employment. Also, this is a responsivity factor. If they're in a wheelchair or they're handicapped, this may be very difficult for them to get the treatment or be able to work. Mental and emotional health, again, also responsivity factors. Low education, you might not be, you may not deal with stress as better than someone else, or family marital situation, you might be in a very abusive relationship. Again, responsivity factors. Then financial circumstances, again, these are all responsivity factors as well. Not able to maintain a job, whether it's transportation, again, family marital, what you view as your attitudes on the society. But just gives you more extra legal information. You look at educational history, victim impact statement. Again, these are all the criminogenic risk factors that we're looking at, that what was being captured in a traditional pre-sentence investigation. And they just didn't know it until we got the risk needs response. So what's the problem with the current information? Some were too short. In Dauphin County, when I came aboard, and mayors will tell you, these pre-sentence reports were 14, 15 pages. I'm saying respectfully, who's reading that? That's very, very long. So they were either too short, too wordy, focused primarily on the criminal history. That's another thing I saw a lot of. Embedded offender risk assessment information, lengthy narrative without providing an actual risk score, for example, and then lacks other specialized assessment information, requiring a separate order, sex offender, drug and alcohol, what have you, and range of sentences ordered in similar cases across the jurisdiction. This is really neat. So there's certain states, Colorado, Idaho, I think Texas is now doing, what they're doing is they're collecting data, and this takes about 5-6 years to do that. For a low-risk offender for this type of charge and risk score, what have you, this is the type of sentence that was received. For example, 68% received a probationary sentence, and of those 68 that received it, 80% had a successful recidivism rate in terms of they didn't get rearrested after being placed. So judiciaries are receiving this information, the same makeup of an offender on the charges and so forth, age group, and what sentences were imposed, and the success rate with that offense. Now that's really good, and to me that's a sentencing guideline for you. So as it relates to EVP, we're almost done. Results of the assessment. A narrative description for each. What we do in Dauphin County, we have a narrative description for each factor domain, a risk score for each factor domain, and we don't give a numeric score. We just give you low, moderate, or if it's a female, low, moderate, high, or very high. Overall risk score, we have it. We don't put it on there. Again, protective factors are really important, like family, church, pro-social, so all those type of things. And responsivity factors, we mark those off. And of course, other assessments, if they're ordered, they're included with the report. Again, recommendations: can the offender be supervised effectively in the community? Suggest length of probation and parole, and probation conditions. Specific programs to address identified criminogenic needs. Some do not provide a recommendation. We don't provide a recommendation in terms of time frame of probation or incarceration. What we recommend in our pre-sentence investigation and intake is what they score at if maintained in the community. These are the type of services that be recommended. Range of sentences ordered in similar cases. You heard me talk about that. That's been really, really beneficial for those states. So challenges with incorporating this is resources of the department. Not every department has an intake unit like we do. We actually have 2 pre-sentence investigator officers, and they do all the pre-sentence investigations, 2 of them. And that's all they do all day. And they're both very good at it, and they enjoy it. And good for them, because it takes some commitment to that. Administrative bias. Again, that's really important, based on if you're doing the reporting, and I know we don't have that problem. I know the two employees very well. You may not like the type of charge it is, and you can skew your recommendation accordingly. But that's not really a huge issue, but that can happen. You have to be mindful. Supportive justice system stakeholders. And this is really important, because this slows down the court process. All right. Pennsylvania is really well known to have almost 80% of their cases are plead out. All right. Even a plea case, a judge could still ask for a pre-sentence investigation. Make sure it's a good deal. It's a good plea deal, or he may not be comfortable with it. He wants more information, he or she. So tough on crime policies. If you have those, they're not always going to work. Compliance, cooperation from the defendant. We're very fortunate. We really haven't had any roadblocks with private counsel or the public defender. Mary Clyde and her team, they've been great with what's going on, and they've been very educated on this and very supportive. So we appreciate her and her team. And then targeted intervention programs. Again, another success for these. Evidence-based key to success is statutory requirement. We're seeing the Commission on Sentencing that has their risk screening tool now, that if you score in SGS Web a low or high, they're recommending to the court to get further information. That further information is a pre-sentence investigation to include a risk needs assessment. And this is some of the other ones here. Points of consideration, really important. High risk does not necessarily translate to the need to incarcerate. All right, low risk does not mean no risk, okay? We have shared stories of unfortunate events with low-risk offenders. I remember one being a 52-year-old woman, first-time arrest for simple possession, wind up a year later getting caught in a big heroin sting, selling a lot of heroin. So, I mean, it can happen. RNA tools are intended to enhance, not replace judicial decision-making. Trust the research. Although EBP sentencing is fairly new, lessons learned from probation and corrections are beginning to have an influence in the courtroom. And I know some of the judges in Dauphin County, I asked them that they speak at these judicial education centers. They like the tool. They find it very informative. Again, key ingredients for success: data collection, quality assurance program, fidelity, funding, education, training, patience, which some of us don't always have. I learned to be more patient, but I think this process has helped me. Collaboration, communication, and support of the judiciary. Very important. Again, I talked about the assessment tool for the Sentencing Commission. Here we are at the end. I just wanted to share a couple quotes. Quite the opposite. Provide more assurance that professionals are using the right strategies and approaches, resulting in reduced misconduct and enhanced safety for all. This is what I like the most. Requiring an offender to confront and change behavior is more intimidating and harsh than allowing the offender to do time or coast through traditional community supervision. We hear it a lot. We hear individuals that are eligible for parole, and they have like 3 months left. Like, no, just keep me in here. I don't want to deal with probation. Just keep me in here, and I want to get out of here clean, no supervision. So again, we're confronting for them to change their behavior, and that takes a lot of work. For Matthew Klein, who's in the National Center for State Courts, who is now with the Commission on Sentencing in Pennsylvania. It's been with them for almost 2 years now. I stole his quote: evidence-based practice of sentencing hold the promise of improving judicial decision-making, which can lead to enhanced public safety and to enhanced use of scarce criminal justice resources. EBP, the right thing to do socially, fiscally, and morally. There you go. I did 5 minutes behind, so thank you. Any questions?
I just wanted to say thank you, Chad, for all that information, and we'll get this posted up. And I did put my email address in the chat. So if you have questions that maybe you asked beforehand, you want some follow-up there, please do email me. We can address either in a separate call or go a little bit more in depth at another time. And Shannon, thank you for touching on what's going to be more discussed in depth at our upcoming session on May 20th at noon, which is on bail practices and pretrial services and overview. So you'll hear a little bit more about kind of how and what pretrial functions. And this work today is that Chad spent an hour and a half speeding through it is foundational to a lot of the change that we've made in the county. So it was a lot of information. It's a lot of good information. This is on YouTube. You can watch it as many times as you want. And we're happy to answer questions. And I think that's hopefully what these sessions are conveying. So if folks don't have any questions right now, or again, you can send them to me later. We will stop the recording, and then anytime, please follow up. And oh, looks like there is one. Yep. Okay. Thanks. Yes. Thank you for attending too. I think that's all. Chad, thank you so very much.
And thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.